Hello, and welcome to CACHE, the portable professional development podcast from CACHE. Thanks for joining us. My name's Dawn, and I'm the editor of CACHE Alumni.
I'm speaking to Linda Baston-Pitt. When you're ready, if you just want to sort of let everybody know who you are and where you're from and a little bit about you, that would be excellent, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Linda Baston-Pitt, and I'm now CEO of Purple Bee Learning, which is a practice-based online training platform that we developed for early years professionals. And one of the key parts of it is that it promotes anything and everything around health and well-being, but from leadership mentoring. And then one of the major things that we've been developing and that we've just recently launched is the online PANCo award that kind of pulls all of the health and well-being elements together. So that's been a kind of a mission of mine and something we've been working on for probably about the last 12 to 15 years. And my background is I've worked within early years, I think almost for nearly 30 years. I came into early years from leaving a nursing career, and in my nursing career I worked in health promotion. So moving into the early years, I thought it's kind of a natural step when I had my two young children. So I set up and ran my own nursery. So I was head of a nursery for 25 years, 120 place in Cambridge, and working with 35 members of staff. And we also, within the 25 years, one of the key things that I recognised was the link between learning and health and well-being, but also that you need to start with the health and well-being of the staff before you really can understand how to manage and support the health and well-being of children, but also being able to support and help parents. And so training was something that we looked at right in the early days of NVQs, but I wasn't desperately happy with how they were developed and delivered. So I developed a partnership with a local college, Cambridge Regional College, and we became a CACHE centre quite a long time ago. But one of the major reasons was to be able to not just deliver qualifications, but be also involved in developing the qualifications. So also influencing what needed to be incorporated. So a gap, and I can keep on talking, Dawn, so you might have to stop me.
So that's all right. There's quite a lot to talk about. You've done so much. First of all, I would never have guessed that you were old enough to have been working in any sector for 30 years, let alone have multiple careers. But yeah, there's loads there. I thought it was really interesting when you said that you couldn't have supported any change in the children's health and well-being until you'd supported staff to understand a little bit more about health and well-being. Is that because without an understanding of that you can't educate others on it, or is that more that staff really need to be bought into the whole idea of health and well-being and the impact that it can have?
I think my naivety as a very junior manager 25 years ago, I assumed, coming from the Lake District, that everybody liked being outdoors. I didn't think anyone was afraid of the rain, and I assumed that people ate relatively healthily. But again, very naive.
You were very wrong.
I thought because I like doing it, everyone would naturally follow and do the same as me. So you think about being a positive role model. We can talk about health and well-being, but unless we truly understand what it means to ourselves, it's very difficult to really understand and translate that into practice within early years. So I felt we were doing it well, but I didn't really feel that we'd embedded sound practice all around, a holistic practice around health and well-being throughout our nursery at the time. So I'm a bit of a researcher and an explorer and constantly curious. So I'm always talking to other people. I'm always trying to find better ways of doing things with and through the staff team. And one of the things we did do, and I thought, there's a lot happening all over the place, but it's very disjointed and we need to kind of pull things together. So I organised a health and wellbeing conference. That was about 15 years ago, I think. But really to pull all of the people that are involved in health and wellbeing across all of the sectors. So one of my passions, and I've been a passionate advocate of health and wellbeing kind of forever, but was how do you bridge the gap between the health element? So how do you bring health, because we were working with health visitors at the time, and education together. And although all of the meetings I'd gone to and the conference that we developed was absolutely brilliant, one thing that I recognised, because I brought dietitians, I brought speakers that had a key strength in certain areas of health and wellbeing, so they were invited. But from health and education, I think we had about 20 odd people that spoke, and we had workshops. Everybody had the same objectives, but our agendas were quite different, so it was very difficult to bring the two together. And I thought the only way we're going to ever be able to do this is to develop a qualification that bridges the gap, so that some of the health models that I remember using as a nurse, I thought, why aren't we using them in earlier? So things like motivational interviewing skills, they're called. There was a huge amount of training that was available, not just to the health sector, but to the early years, but nobody in early years recognized that it was something that they could actually use. So there were lots of techniques and skills that we desperately needed in early years, but it wasn't coming through training. So the qualification, the PANCo, kind of emerged as a way of bridging the gap and bringing it together, health and education. So the models that we could share. And for me,
that's great. And there's loads there that I want to sort of pick up on as well. First of all, just because I'm aware that not everybody who's listening will be from an early years background, or if they are, they might not know what a PANCo is. Could you explain for anyone listening what a PANCo is?
Well, a PANCo, we wanted to, it was kind of with a small working party that we pulled this together. That was kind of following the conference that we had. So I made sure that we had somebody that worked in public health, somebody that worked in FE, and then me, who was kind of the early years part of it all. And we wanted to develop something that made sense to people. So where we've got a SENCO in every setting, we decided that a PANCo would be a similar kind of acronym, so that people would recognize that as not just a qualification, but it's also a role. So the PANCo stands for Physical Activity and Nutrition Coordinator. And the PANCo qualification is a Wellbeing in Action intervention. And one of the major goals of that is to promote healthy nutrition and physical activity. And our overriding vision was it was to support the prevention of obesity, which I think we all know is going on to kind of a catastrophic level, and it's getting worse. And one of the biggest reasons, and that's why going back to kind of 20 years ago, I really did feel that we needed a qualification, the PANCo, that would give early years educators a really robust knowledge base about healthy eating and physical activity, because the training that we've had and got through, it's basic and it's great, but it's quite limiting. So we needed to take it onto the next level, and the level 4 was really the next stepping stone. And it's, to me, and that's where CACHE have been absolutely brilliant, because it was quite different and innovative, but something that people hadn't recognized before, because the training is more than just a qualification and not just about based on a body of knowledge. The PANCos we saw, and kind of the group that developed it initially, the PANCos are agents of change. And one of the biggest things are they're actively involved in assessing the needs of their own setting. And one of the major things there is you need to be able to assess where you are. And a lot of settings have really struggled to where do you start when it comes to putting a wellbeing strategy or policy together? I don't really know. I mean, a lot of people focus on the food side, but struggle with the physical. A lot of people are focusing on the mental health side, but only in isolation. How do we bring all of those things together? And that's where, by using sound assessment tools and metrics, it means that PANCos then can make informed decisions. They can target evidence-based interventions, where a lot of settings have tapped into interventions, but they've been quite short-term and not sustainable. So this was about a PANCo helping to improve the health and well-being of everyone. So children, first and foremost, families, but also the staff team. Because as I was just saying to you, unless you support them and they really do understand and are doing it for the right reasons, that's where things tend to fall apart.
Yeah, and I do think that something that you said there was really important, was that there was lots of stuff going on in terms of physical health, mental health, nutrition, but they were all in isolation. And actually, those things are all impacted by one another, because everything happens within that one body. Is that an idea that you think is sort of fairly well known now, or do you think we're still fighting this idea that all of those things and treating those sort of symptoms?
Yeah,
I think we're getting better at that.
Yeah, I think we are getting better at it, and I think because it's become more explicit with the new inspection framework, where it's about well-being of children, but also you're expected to support the well-being of staff. But how do you evidence that, and how do you show that, is the slightly difficult thing. And one of the things we've kind of built into the PANCo qualification is that it's not about focusing on single issues, as we've just said. You can't just have a bolt-on approach, because it doesn't ultimately create conditions for well-being of a whole setting approach. And that's something that we really, really support PANCos with, that they need to build a sustainable approach and think holistically. And all of the things we do and look at as a part, because we kind of rewrote and we keep developing the PANCo qualification with CACHE to make sure that it's fit for purpose. So for example, the things that we look at, and if you're thinking holistically, would be bringing lots of elements within a setting, as you've just kind of mentioned, together. And that's everything from policy, leadership, curriculum, environment, staff welfare, partnerships, and that could be external partnerships. And one of the other biggest elements and things that we've just recently added is the children's own voice, because I think you just recognise you can't do well-being to someone. Well-being's very personal to an individual, so unless it means something to that person, simply by flinging in some of the interventions, it might help one person, but it's kind of missed the point with a lot of others. And it might be that it isn't about having donuts for a treat every Friday. It's about, I need time off, just half a day a week every now and again, because I need to catch up on my ironing and things that I'm doing at home, because it's all getting too much for me. So, it needs to be meaningful to the individual, but it's about how you help everyone in the setting to understand what a whole setting approach looks like, and equally what part they play. So it doesn't matter whether you're a junior nursery nurse, whether you're a student, or whether you're a manager. Does everybody understand the importance of well-being, but across the whole setting?
We obviously, CACHE Alumni works across health and social care, early years education, and education in general in terms of our audience group. And all of those professionals, nurses included, and early years professionals included, generally, because their vocation is to care for other people, they're at the bottom of their own list when it comes to their own health and well-being, which is why we see such high levels of burnout in that sector.
But you're right, it's across all of those sectors. And one of the things I decided to do was a master's in positive psychology, because that was kind of looking through health and well-being through a different lens. And I really needed to develop my own understanding so that I could build on my own experience, but that would then, I'd then use that and build that into the PANCo qualification. Because one of the things within health is quite often quite a negative, it's a fix-it approach where, as you're saying, you kind of sort out the symptoms, but you never really get to the cause. So although you may get better and you might feel good, to me it's about, and the thing I learned doing my positive psychology, it's about people flourishing. So it's about people really feeling well and doing good and feeling good, not happy all of the time, but building resilience, so that when life does get difficult, or there are always going to be bumps in the road, but you have the capacity to be able to overcome them. The WHO definition now, the World Health Organization, and just to quote, it's a state of complete physical, social, and mental well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So it isn't just about a sticking plaster and making somebody feel well. And you've just kind of said it, but there are 3 domains that enable people to feel well. It's physical, social, and mental. And all of those 3 elements we need to understand, but also look at how that's embedded across a whole organisation so that everyone's involved in it.
I think a lot of people who think about early years from outside of the sector probably don't understand how full on a career in early years education is, whether that is that you're a level 2 practitioner sort of starting out and working with children, or at any of those sort of higher levels where you're taking on a little bit more of a specialist role, or you're managing a setting. I think there is still very much a misperception that early years is a jolly place to be, and that there's lots of, you just get to play all day, and that it's really fun. Which obviously there is a lot of fun to be had in early years, and you've got to be the sort of person who does want to roll your sleeves up and get involved and have a nice time with children. But there's an awful lot more goes behind it, and an awful lot of pressure that people outside of the sector don't necessarily see. Do you think that we should be doing more as a sector to sort of support early years practitioners to talk about their own experience and to talk about the negative experiences that they have as part of their role?
And I think we need to build that in to the framework of every setting. And I mean, for me, the really good news is, from my experience of working in a nursery for a long time, but also working with other practitioners, and from my master's in positive psychology, is that all of the health and well-being issues, they're all teachable skills. We can build our resources, and within a setting, if you're looking at children, we can provide opportunities that teach resilience. We know that we can help children to learn and value themselves and to care for others, and we can support children to be active and to eat. Now, that's something that lots of settings are doing really well, but we can also learn from children themselves by asking what they want. Give them the opportunity, even very young children, to have a clear idea about what they enjoy and what makes them happy. But to me, what's equally as important is that running alongside that, the work we do with children, developing a holistic wellbeing approach, also supports staff to develop their own physical, mental and social well-being. And to me, it's through a strengths-based approach. So you look for the things that are really going well. So for example, if you asked a practitioner to list all of the things they're good at and all of the things they're bad at, I can almost guarantee they'll maybe put 2 things they're good at, but they'll do 10 things that they're not good at. So we sometimes have this negative spiral, which also creates kind of negative emotions. So I agree we have to address some of the things that aren't going well. But if you're having a staff meeting, for example, at 6 o'clock when everyone's absolutely shattered, a lot of staff meetings tended to focus on, well, we need to go through lots of things that, either I'm not happy about or we need to sort out. So they're quite a negative connotation. So if you flip that and say, I want you to come to the next staff meeting, but I want you to write 3 things that have gone really well this week, each person, and in the staff meeting or the staff training session at the end of the week, whatever it may be, you start off with that. Everyone feels more positive, so you're more able to deal with some of the negative things. But we need to focus more on the things we're doing well and build on it, and quite often the negative things start to dissipate because
I think a lot of people in the sector have come to early years from a place where maybe they've been told that they're not very academic, or they haven't done sort of particularly well at school, because the way school careers advice used to work is that we used to point academic people or people who did well at school towards university, and then we only recruited for early years and care from who was left, rather than giving people the option of working in any of those places, regardless of how academic they were, if they had the right skill set to do that. I am very happy that we've changed some of the way that careers advice works in school, and things like the Gatsby benchmarks mean that all learners have to be introduced to vocational education as an option. because there are lots of people like me who might have wanted to go into something like, social care, or, into something that was a vocation, that was something that we cared a lot about, but we're actually pointed towards academia just because we got good grades at school. But what that has meant, I think, historically, is that a lot of people have come to care or to early years because they're very passionate about it, but they haven't necessarily had the support of being told that they're very good at it, because education didn't focus on those career paths as a career. It was just a job. And actually, it is a career. It's a really important career. And without that career existing, nobody else in the country could go to work. So there'd be no infrastructure for the entire UK if we didn't have the support of the amazing early years practitioners who develop children and bring children on and embed them with all of this knowledge, so that life can continue for everybody else as well. It must have been really interesting for you coming to early years with a background as a nurse.
It seemed like a natural progression, but I again naively moved into it thinking that the early years was a profession that people had high regard for. But I've always believed and will never change that we know, and the evidence, research, everything is there, that the critical time in a child's development is between 0 and 5. So if we get that right, so I kind of launched into it thinking I want to change the world, I want to make it the best it can possibly be, but it has to be with and through the people that I work with, and we need to keep constantly raising the profile, but also raising the professionalism of the sector, which I think without a doubt it's moved in a very positive direction. I think there's still a long way to go, and obviously with changes of governments we kind of almost reach it and then it kind of tails off again. But I think there's so much we're doing ourselves. It's not about waiting for external bodies to tell us and raise the profile. It's about us doing it for ourselves. And I think this is what I really love about PANCo, because this was something that came from within the sector. It wasn't something that's appeared from the DFE. We created it because there was a desperate need, and there was a missing link. There was a missing link in that we needed. We've got highly trained early years teachers, we've got highly trained, skilled practitioners, but we need to build professional development, but how do you do that? And the leap was always from level 3 to graduate leader. And, not every nursery nurse, and me running a setting with 35, not every nurse, A, was suitable for that role, but B, there was a huge gap in training. So they were coasting at level 3. What can you do to develop the skills of someone even further? And that's where the PANCo fitted in, because it was the missing link, so that you had someone in a setting that was trained and responsible for promoting health and leading it across the setting. But it needed to be at a level 4, so it was a natural stepping stone. And that's the exciting part. There's about 3,000 odd PANCos out there now doing incredible things and work that I'm kind of tapping into now and building they're called PANCo Pioneer case studies, because it's all about, one of the biggest things, it's about sharing good practice. And that's another thing that's been difficult within the early years. And I've kind of sat on lots of different working parties at government level, and they're always, well, Linda, how are we going to get the message out? And I think, oh my God, you've never even thought about how, because it is very difficult. And one of the best ways to get sound messages, because it is very confusing, health and wellbeing, but is through high quality training, so that everybody has a grounded and foundational knowledge about health and wellbeing that we can build on.
I think you're right in that this provides some really good it's a really good avenue for CPD and allows people to develop into an area of early years if that health and wellbeing piece is actually something that really interests them. I think one of the things that we need more of in the sector is more opportunity for people to develop their own skills around the parts of the sector that really float their boat.
It's a very positive qualification.
Yeah, and I think from your experience of coming to the sector, having had a career in a different field, and obviously that you said that you were a nurse and that you worked in health communication, so you've sort of found your own niche within early years and really developed that and done a lot of good to support the sector. Would you encourage people from other backgrounds to consider early years as somewhere that they can make a difference and continue their career?
Without a shadow of a doubt. And one of the things within our nursery, I mean, we had people applying that worked, they'd worked in retail all their lives or an area, but they'd come to us later on in life saying, I've always wanted to work with children. Now I'm at a point where my children are older, I can now make a career change. Is it something I can do? Because one of the hardest things is being able to access training at different ages and stages through your life. But because we became our own training centre, it meant that it didn't matter what age the person was that came to us, we were always able to support and develop them. And to me, that adds huge diversity and wealth of experience. And I know within lots of other nurseries, and Leaf are working really hard to get men in childcare, but having a balance of practitioners, male, female, and different ethnic minorities, because we've got staff from Portugal, we've got staff from India, they bring it so much more to your setting. They also have different ways of doing things, so we're able to kind of understand and share and learn so much more from each other, that adds to the quality of the education that you're delivering to children. So to me, it's almost an essential thing. It's not always easy to find those people, but it's about making your centre, your setting as attractive as possible.
Or in your experience, are there things that settings can do to support staff to share skills sort of amongst themselves, or to develop where it isn't taking a toll on staff being away from the setting, and embed some things to maybe take that load off a little bit and improve the well-being of staff so that they've got a little bit more capacity?
Absolutely, and it's about being creative, but it's about understanding what learning means, because learning isn't just about going off on a training course, because we know how hard it is to release someone. And equally, some of the evidence suggests that if you go off on a training course, unless you're able to put it into practice or even talk to somebody about the training you've just done, what that person's learned is lost. And mentoring to me is one of the most important. Across other sectors and in health, mentoring is it's kind of used all of the time. In teaching, mentoring is used a lot of the time, so especially NQTs that come in. But within early years, I've noticed that mentoring tends to be used when someone joins the setting and they have their induction, but once their induction's finished, the mentoring ceases. So mentoring for me is one way to embed. So a lot of our team leaders trained as qualified mentors, so that also helped with health and wellbeing, because they were the kind of first point of contact, and it was primarily to look at and support individuals through their journey. It meant someone was there as a sounding board, and that might be not just about their work issues. Sometimes it might be personal issues that you could talk to your mentor about, but on a one-to-one, it meant that personalized training and approach, every member of staff was being supported. Another thing that you can do really, really well is supervisions, and supervisions for us became something that everybody couldn't wait for, and we have supervisions with every member of staff each month. So really, we didn't really have annual appraisals. They weren't really necessary after a period of time, but the one-to-one supervisions, we built in health and wellbeing questions. So lots of appreciative inquiry questioning. What do you think about? How do you think we could change? What do you think we do really well? Stimulated and sparked off lots of pedagogical conversations, but you really started to talk about the work that you were doing, and there was a much deeper understanding about what you were doing and why you were doing it, because a lot of people are doing things on a day-to-day, but if you ask them why they were doing it and what difference is it making, quite often they can't answer it, and that would worry me. So that's down to setting to ensure that those pedagogical conversations are constant in everything and anything that you do. So trained staff should be encouraging those, so that you don't.
And I think that you were right when you're talking about people talking about their successes or the things that they've done well, and not necessarily being able to frame that through a pedagogical lens, or not really fully understanding why it's made such an impact. We found that when we launched CACHE Alumni as a service that went live a couple of years ago, and the whole reason for that was to help people to sort of raise the profile of the sector a little bit and be able to sort of frame some of their wins positively and talk a little bit more about it, but also to give them a few more tools to help them to embed that. So the articles that are on CACHE Alumni are sort of helping to translate some of that legislation into things that you can put into practice day to day. Or Anne Rogers writes a series for us where she talks about different lovely activities that you can do with children, and then links them back to pedagogy and theorists so that people understand why they're doing those things and what they're developing, and can really help to talk about that with parents through like learning diaries and the things that they're doing to communicate what's going on day to day in settings. But one of the things that we really found when we started talking to our members was that if we asked them what they were good at, they would tell us they weren't good at anything. But if we asked them what they enjoyed, they could tell us all of the reasons that they were lucky to work in the settings that they worked in. And actually, by framing it that way, instead of thinking about what they were good at, they would naturally talk about the things that they were good at within a setting, because really we're all set up the same, and they're the things that we enjoy or the things that we're good at. So it was things like, you'd say, so what do you enjoy about your job? And they'd go, oh, well, I'm really lucky because I get to see kids like all the way through that 2-year period, and I get to do this and I get to do that, and we really get to see this happen. And it was sort of that framing device of just asking questions differently, like you're saying.
And it's those, and that's kind of a big part of it, positive conversations, which is something, so it's literally, something you can change that stimulates that is how we talk to each other. And that's where we, in one of the I think we brought it into the PANCo as well, but you can ask one question one way and this is the answer you're likely to get, but you can flip it into an appreciative inquiry, because it's about, you want people to be curious, and you want people to be excited, and you want people to get to the point where, as you've just said, they can articulate and explain how they feel about things and what makes them happy. And we do it with children, but we don't always do it with staff.
I think it's something that we can all benefit from, being able to actually review our achievements. We're all very focused on what went wrong, but we never really take time to reflect on what went well.
As you're saying, it's the kind of the taking time to reflect, but it's also building it into the culture of your organisation. It's funny you're saying that, because one of my colleagues who did the Masters with me, she's doing a PhD in imposter syndrome, so I've done a bit of work with her. But I hadn't realised how so many people suffer from imposter syndrome, but for all of the reasons you've just said, but you almost kind of kick yourself in, why am I here? Why is anybody even listening to me? Why is this important? And you sort of constantly, you can get into a spiral of just constantly asking yourself those questions instead of, as you're saying. Yeah,
you worry about getting found out. Someone's going to realise that I'm not really as good as they think I am, and it's all going to fall apart.
And I'm going to be found out. Yeah. Yeah, but it's amazing. But one of the first things is to actually recognise it. It's like that with anything, and then start to put things into practice. But these are things with very young members of staff we started to do, and where they'd be quite sceptical, they do it. It's just become the norm now. So it's like you're saying, kind of the three things that you're grateful for that you bring to a staff meeting. I don't need to ask people to do that anymore, and they've changed it a little bit and developed into slightly different things, but it's something that's a part of our practice. And and when we're talking about embedding initiatives, they're the things I'm talking about, but they need to be things that come from within the organisation, rather than, I've seen this, we're going to do it, I want all of you to do it, and everyone's saying, but why? I don't really understand the purpose. But it needs to, that's the big thing for me, it needs to come within. And that's where, to me, the PANCo role really supports that, because they're there to evaluate, they're there to kind of assess areas of well-being, not just children, but also of staff. But the other thing is about supporting training and CPD is about connecting and sharing with other professionals across not just the sector, but beyond the sector, but finding mechanisms to do that. because one of the things, especially coming from a health background, we also had nurse students coming to our setting because there weren't enough paediatric places within a hospital. So there were other opportunities that staff could see that eventually they could move on and be a paediatric nursery nurse. So for me, I wanted to always show people that we work with that there were so many other opportunities, a bit like you're saying, you come into early years and, well, what does that mean? Is that all you can become is a manager? Well, there's so much more. And that's the great thing about CACHE have mapped out to show the different avenues and routes that you can move into.
I know there's lots of quotes attributed to Einstein that you didn't actually say. But my favourite Einstein quote ever is that one about judging a fish. And he said that everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life believing that it's stupid. Yeah. And I think that's really pertinent in terms of talking about people who want to progress and who want to do more, but don't necessarily feel that they can, because everyone can find the thing that they're most interested in and develop in that area if they know how to find the direction that they need to travel in.
Absolutely. And the more we tap into our own strengths and the strengths of others, you do without a doubt move on to another plane of building your confidence, your ability to try other things, and whether it's carrying on within the sector or attempting something like a PANCo, but recognizing that you've got so much more to give and do. And you want people to, I reckon, unless we feel challenged, we start questioning, well, what's the point in it all? And I've noticed with so many staff and people that I've worked with, you can see people that are so excited to learn and do more, and because they are challenged, the more excited and enthused they are about the work.
This is all amazing, and I could talk to you absolutely all day, but I'm very conscious that I've already kept you for an hour and a half. If people want to find out more about the role of a PANCo or how PANCo came to exist, obviously they can find out about where they can do qualifications and about the qualification of a PANCo on the CACHE website by searching for PANCo. But in terms of that wider knowledge of the services that sort of you've got and the just the PANCo in general, where can people find that online?
Yeah, well, you can go to, we've got a PANCo resource page, and that's kind of all free information and advice and support. The other thing we have are 3 free PANCo videos that kind of explains everything from what is a PANCo, what do they do, what the kind of the bigger goal of PANCo is, because my ultimate goal is to have a PANCo in every setting, just as you would have a SENCo, and it will have regional conferences across the country. So that's the long-term vision, which is starting to happen. But equally, it's kind of what does a PANCo look in practice. So there's 3 videos kind of summarize everything that I've talked about. So it really gives people a good idea of what it's all about, and they're free. And
yeah, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time and for talking to us. It's been really lovely.
Don't forget, if you've got some best practice or you'd like to share with us something great, you can get in touch with us at alumni@cache.org.uk. That's alumni, ALUMNI, at CACHE, CACHE for echo.org.uk, and would love to speak to you. You can find us at the CACHE Alumni website at www.cachealumni.org.uk, or through the main CACHE website for information about qualifications and other CPD at www.cacheforecho.org.uk. Thanks very much, and until next time, take care.